Who wants to be the next Italian wine ambassador? Join an exclusive network of 400 Italian wine ambassadors across 48 countries. Vinitaly International Academy is coming to Chicago on October 19th to 21st, and to Almaty, Kazakhstan from November 16th to 18th. Don't miss out. Register now at vinitaly.com.
Welcome to the Italian Wine Podcast. I'm Cynthia Chaplin, and this is Voices. Every Wednesday, I will be sharing conversations with international wine industry professionals, discussing issues in diversity, equity, and inclusion through their personal experiences working in the field of wine. If you enjoy the show, please subscribe and rate our show wherever you get your pods. Hello and welcome to Voices. This is Cynthia Chaplin, and today I am very excited to have Anna Brittain on Voices with me. Anna's a leader in environmental management and policy, and she's worked as a sustainability consultant for the likes of Ontario Craft Wineries, Sustainable Winegrowing British Columbia, and the California Sustainable Winegrowing Alliance. She is currently the executive director of Napa Green, which is a nonprofit vineyard and winery sustainable certification program. And in 2022, she launched RISE Climate and Wine Symposium, and she was named a Future 40 Tastemaker by Wine Enthusiast in 2023. Wine Business Monthly also named her as a wine industry leader, and this year she was included in the Imbibe 75 list of people that will shape the way we drink. So lots and lots of things to talk about, Anna. I can't believe you have time to even come on the podcast today, so thank you for that.
This is fun to do. Thank you for having me.
No, it's a pleasure. Before we get into the nitty-gritty of what you actually do, which is very cool and involved, I know you studied environmental science and policy and management. So how did you move from sort of research and policy into the world of wine? What was the journey there?
Well, I actually grew up in the Napa Valley mostly. We moved a lot, but mostly the Napa Valley. And I actually really felt like it was a bubble. I wasn't intending to come back. I felt like people didn't get out of the valley. I wasn't going to work in wine. And I left, and my whole career has been in, some form of environmental management and policy. But I got drawn back in fatefully. It was one summer between, interestingly, longer story, working in Vietnam. And I was on my way to start my master's program at Yale. And I just needed a summer job, something to do. And I got connected with a consultant, John Garn, back in 2006, who specifically did sustainable wine growing consulting. So that's when I started getting familiar with the California Sustainable Wine Growing Alliance and working with leaders like Benziger. And really kind of got drawn into this very niche world of specifically working on sustainability and climate action in the wine industry. And I kind of took a circuitous route, but ultimately came back to that. And I've worked in that space for something like 13 years now.
Wow. Well, you say it's a niche part of the wine industry, but I think that is changing and needs to change. And you are definitely one of the people who is going to shake that up. So I know you started working with Napa Green certified land and winery programs in around 2015, and you became their executive director in 2019. So during all that time, you developed what's called the 6 pillars of sustainability. So I want to talk about this because it's fascinating. Most people tend to hear the word sustainability and think vineyard, pesticide, basta. So your 6 pillars really go a lot farther than that in ways that I think are important. So tell us about the 6 pillars, and why did you decide that you wanted to define sustainability this way?
Yeah, it's interesting. There's so many conferences now. Thankfully, almost at every conference and symposium, sustainable wine growing, as you're saying, is now a topic, along with regenerative, which I know we'll talk more about. And almost everywhere I go and hear this spoken about, not just in the wine industry, but elsewhere, you just hear people lamenting sustainability. Like, oh, it's unclear. It doesn't have a clear definition. It doesn't mean anything. Is it greenwashing? And I just kind of heard this too many times back in 2021, sitting right where I am right now with my dog. And I slammed my hand on the table and I said, come on, There's 6 pillars of leadership that anyone needs to be doing. 5 of them apply to any business. Only one of them is ag specific, that anyone needs to be doing to really call themselves leaders. And I'm sure I'll say more than once in this interview, we have to be thinking whole systems. We can't just be thinking in silos. We have to be thinking in an integrated way. And so that's what these 6 pillars are about, are kind of a filter to really say, is this business or is this organization, is this program really taking a whole systems, true leadership approach to sustainability and climate action? So the 6 pillars are water efficiency, energy efficiency, waste prevention and supply chain, soil health and biodiversity, social justice and diversity and inclusion. And then all of that falls within the umbrella of climate action and regenerative agriculture. So I think that has really taken hold because a lot of people were looking for some kind of really clear structure, and that has resonated with a lot of people, which I'm grateful for.
It is fascinating. This is a topic that has really become important to me over the past year as I've learned more and more about it, particularly this idea of social justice and sustainability having a lot to do with our workforce and our vineyard stewards, not just the land itself. So how is Napa Green going about the business of certifying vineyards and wineries? How many certifications have been awarded since you started this?
Yes, well, I'll say first, we completely redeveloped our vineyard certification in 2021. So, on the point you just made, to focus specifically on regenerative viticulture and climate action and social justice. And we really have very intentionally put that social equity element at the foundation. You really can't have environmental or economic sustainability without social sustainability. And I will say it's interesting that at first, when we came out with that as the first element of 6 elements of our vineyard certification, there was pushback. People that, over time, it's kind of been lost sight that social sustainability was always a core part of sustainability. But for many people, it's become only associated with environmental sustainability. And so we've seen a gradual coming on board with that and embracing of that. But I did just have to mention that based on your point. But what we basically have is a roadmap for leadership for the vineyard. It's more than 90 different standards that vineyards have to implement, growers have to implement, largely across those 6 pillars, but then they're kind of, custom zoned into the vineyard. And then on the winery side, same thing. There's 6 elements. There's actually more than 125 different standards that they have to implement, again, across those pillars. And very specifically and interestingly to us, is that we don't just hand people a roadmap and say, go figure it out, hire a consultant, have fun, come back to us when you've done it, and someone will come out and third party certify you. We actually have an expert team that goes out and does boots on the ground work with the growers and with the vintners. And so I have team members that go out and do what are called carbon farm plans. So it's basically kind of a custom evaluation of where are you at right now in terms of regenerative practices and what more could you do to be more regenerative. And also does irrigation assessments. So how is your system doing in terms of efficiency and how could you really maximize that efficiency? And then similarly on the winery side, we have an engineer that goes out and does what's called an integrated resource assessment. That doesn't sound very sexy, but it's a really critical way of kind of one-stop evaluating energy, water, waste, looking at all the systems and providing recommendations to make everything as efficient as possible. And critically, we're also always focused on trying to help people save money and reduce their bottom line. So we have these really interesting kind of one-to-one hand-holding processes, but then people get through the standards, they get through the on-site work, and then everyone has an action plan because this is all about continuing improvement. And someone comes out and does a third-party audit and really just validates that everyone's walking the talk of what they're doing, what they say that they're doing, basically.
I love that you have your own team that goes out and helps. I think this plays into your ethos of sustainability because your team is clearly as vested in these wineries becoming certified as they are. So I think you're creating sort of this holistic 360-degree system, not only with the pillars and the standards that people need to meet to become certified, but also with the interaction of your team, which I think is pretty unique. I can't think of anywhere else in the world where they are doing that with an in-house team. So before we walk away from this, let's just I get what you said about how people pushed back against social sustainability. Let's just talk about this for our listeners who aren't all that familiar with that term. Can you sort of fill people in on what that actually means and what needs to be done to add this, to our pillars of how we see ourselves as sustainable or not?
Yeah, well, first, we're in an agricultural industry, so we're heavily dependent on farm workers, and so that's a group that often needs to be cared for in ways that it sometimes hasn't been in the past. And then in our industry specifically, I'm a very candid person. This has been a pretty overwhelmingly white, overwhelmingly male industry, and so we really have to think more about drawing a more diverse group of people both to drinking wine, but also working in wine. And that will help draw a more diverse group of people into drinking wine. And so we have a kind of foundational set of standards, both for the vineyard and for the winery. I'd say, critically very important in the vineyard. And of course, that starts with kind of basic things like a good living wage, competitive wage, and benefits, and vacation, and the classic ways that we care for employees. But then it also just moves into opportunities for advancement, doing performance reviews to make sure you know where people want to be headed and what can you do to help them get there. Doing training in what your sustainability commitments are and asking the teams for their input. Doing kind of cross collaborations where vineyard workers get to go into the winery and see what happens, and winery folks get to go into the vineyard and see what happens. And again, trying to break down those silos. So it's really quite extensive around training, engagement, safety, care. And I think what you find across the board, right, is if people feel cared for and they feel safe and they feel included and they feel listened to, then they stick around. And especially in our industry, the value of people that have built that specialized knowledge in the vineyard and that specialized knowledge in the winery is particularly valuable when you're making this agricultural crop product with the weather changing year to year. That specialized knowledge is critically important. And we absolutely see those differences between places where they can't hold on to staff for more than a year. And what are those costs of that turnover and that new onboarding and that new training and that trying to get someone else up to speed, versus we have places where everyone on the team has been there over 10 years and that turnover doesn't happen at all. So we try to think a lot about to kind of the return on investment of people. As you invest in people, they reinvest in your business. And so that's a really critical part of what we do.
Well, of course, you're talking to the DEI woman in wine here, so you're really singing my song, and I think this is so important. So, let me ask you, in terms of sustainability as a whole, but also kind of keeping our eye on this social justice side of things. You've done a lot of work on environmental management and policy, both nationally and internationally. So, what differences do you see between the US and other countries in terms of wine industry sustainability? And I am completely on your page with, this industry was fat old white men drinking claret for a very long time.
Yeah.
What are the biggest challenges we face in getting organizations on side with the concept of sustainability, climate action, social justice? How does the U.S. compare? Well, how do other countries compare to the U.S.? Because I think you're a bit ahead of us.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, so let's be sure to kind of define. I'm going to be talking specifically about sustainability in the wine industry if we're looking at it specifically in that context. It's really interesting that, of course, I feel like Europe is really ahead of us in terms of that environmental consciousness, that commitment to climate action. But when it comes to social justice, social equity standards, specifically within the wine industry, there's a lot of work left to do. And especially, because I come from having consulted in this space for a long time, now running this nonprofit, I've really evaluated those, all of those sustainable wine growing programs that are out there. So again, kind of depending how you filter it, and I use the six pillars, but depending how you filter it, there's maybe 15 to 20 sustainable wine growing specific programs in the world. And a lot of those programs are just for the vineyard, which I think is problematic because, again, whole systems, we need to be thinking from soil to bottle, from the farm through production. And a lot of those programs have absolutely no social equity standards. I mean, quite the majority. And so I think that is a very critical issue. We have to make sure that that is an element of any program that we really give attention to as showing leadership in this space. So I do think that it's interesting you say that, because I've been sort of hearing that more and more, this feeling that in terms of this topic specifically, we really are stepping out as leaders. And I'm proud to do that and do that with my team, because they're all very dedicated to this.
We need you. We definitely need you. Just getting back to, what do you think sort of the obstacles are in getting organizations on side with these sorts of concepts? I mean, I live in Italy. Obviously, I've lived here for a while. Italy is slow to change. We're quite cutting edge with sustainability in the vineyard. But I think we're a little behind on some of these other ideas. So what challenges do you face, when you're doing things with programs around the world, or, policy around the world? What are the obstacles? What do we need to break down here?
Well, I think the first obstacle is one I pointed to, which is really, I've studied this my whole life, so I know deep in the weeds of how the sustainability conversation has developed, and I won't go down that road. But initially, when this concept really came to the forefront in the late '80s, early '90s, social sustainability was core, and over time, as I said, that's gotten lost, and the majority of people think sustainability equals environment. That's it. So a first challenge we have is getting people past that kind of siloed view of what sustainability means. Another challenge, of course, is this gets touchy. This is a sensitive topic when you start talking about justice. I won't name names, but I was talking to someone in a region, a country that's faced a lot of injustice, and she said, "I love this term social justice, but a lot of people would balk at this because they then it implies there's been injustice, which there has been, but we don't want to talk about that." So, this is a sensitive topic. We're getting into things that people can be uncomfortable about. And I'd say specifically in our industry, it's really gone to the forefront since 2020. And it's been hard for a lot of people to really embrace and feel like they know how to speak about this the right way, or comfortable with the language. It can be challenging in that way. It can make people uncomfortable. And so we have to get past that discomfort. I think another challenge, and this isn't maybe consistent the world over, but especially here in California, is just how heavily regulated we already are, and it just can be extremely onerous, especially around labor, in many ways that are critically important, but can already be overwhelming businesses. And so they feel like, oh, well, isn't that, the fact that I'm meeting my compliance requirements, isn't that enough? Why are you asking me to do more? And while, we sympathize with the regulatory burden, it's not enough. It's not requiring that next level leadership in terms of making sure employees really feel engaged and listened to and cared for. And so getting past some of those hurdles is maybe here, regionally, one of the biggest kind of pushbacks we've had is just, we're already overwhelmed. Now you're asking us to do more. It's not even something we've associated with sustainability until now. But also one of the things we do is just put together resources, try to find the resources. So again, it's not just like we're sending you into the wilderness to figure it out for yourself. We really do try to help people fill any gaps that they need to fill on this front.
I think you're on the money there. I think sensitivity and discomfort is a big problem getting this. And of course, cultures vary around the world, and people's reactions to these sorts of concepts are different. And getting, what I always say is, we need to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. But yeah, it's so interesting what you said about that, and how to help people through it. And I know you've said in the past that policy versus boots on the ground give very different perspectives on sustainability. So, you're talking about how your team gets out there and, holds hands with people and actually stands shoulder to shoulder and says, we're going to help you do this. So I'm just wondering what policymakers can learn from the boots on the ground team and implement.
Well, I mean, this is probably just going to sound like maybe an unhelpful generalization, but just almost all of the time, people making policy have never been on the ground in the things that they're regulating. So just, making that, and we've been, regionally, it's as close as something like the Board of Supervisors here. We have a group kind of locally that sets a lot of the regional policy. And thankfully, we've been building a lot of strong relationships where they come out to our workshops and they come to the Rise Climate and Wine Symposium, and they're really building that true understanding of the industry that can help inform the decisions that they're making. Because we do see a lot of policy. While I am not anti-regulation, we do see a lot of policies coming through, specifically in the environmental space, that are kind of off the mark and really making the change that they want to make. They're not necessarily focusing on the areas where they could have the biggest win. And that's really frustrating because so much money is going into these policies. One specific example I can give is we're really heavily focused on groundwater sustainability here in California. We've had a lot of drawdown on our groundwater. But the regulation, and specifically more regionally, is really focusing on irrigation, critically important, absolutely. But what we also have is a lot of tremendously unhealthy forests, which is, of course, contributing to all of the mega fires that we've been having. And once you improve forest health and reduce density and invasive species and over density of species that shouldn't be that dense, forests are one of the main ways to store and capture and bring back water into a system. And yet our groundwater sustainability policy isn't focusing on forest restoration at all. So just one example of kind of a siloed disconnect. So, just wanting to get people to, we're here for you to come out and connect, right? And really understand the industries that you're regulating and see what the biggest opportunities are that regulators can help support.
I like the way that you're approaching it, as a means to creating leadership rather than a means to making corporations feel like they're not doing enough. I think, encouraging people to lead is always a benefit because it comes with, emotional and moral and philosophical responsibility, and people can really stand up for that. So I like that approach that's not punitive, but, really encouraging. So you open the door for me because I want to talk about RISE. So first of all, tell everybody what the acronym stands for and what's the symposium, the project itself, all about, because it's very cool.
Yeah, so RISE, that stands for Resilience, Innovation, Sustainability, and Empowerment, which I think is a wonderful name. But RISE in and of itself says a lot. This is something, again, so we're always thinking about, okay, what are some of the traditional things we're always seeing? We were thinking about conferences and symposiums. We're thinking, man, so many of these things are really kind of focused on education and inspiration. And you go and you kind of like, it's a little too much sometimes. And you're like, okay, that was cool. And you go home and you typically go back into just your normal day to day and typical inertia. It's not really a call to action or the empowerment that's needed to take that action and have that impact. And so we thought we really want to try to create the leading kind of climate and wine symposium and have it absolutely be action and impact oriented. And then even in terms of its format, think about what are some of the ways you can keep people energized and not just like fading out at the end of the day. So what it is a series of 6 half-day events that are organized again around those 6 pillars. So each day is really focusing in particular on one element like water or social justice or soil health and biodiversity. But then, of course, these are all integrated whole systems topics. So we're trying to make a lot of cross connections on any given day. But every day there is an absolute call to action and a ask to commit to do at least one thing based on that day and to share that commitment, and really trying to provide a lot of practical resources, including the people that are there to help create that action. So we already know of a lot of actions that have come out of that, from groups that have formed around zero waste to wineries adopting blue morph, like zero water sanitation technology, to another vineyard going no-till coming out of the workshop, dry farming. Another vineyard decided to go into dry farming after RISE. So we've really felt a lot of kind of power behind just how many commitments to action there have been. Of course, there's that education and inspiration, but we've now done it twice. We did it in 22 and 23. Huge undertaking, 70 speakers, 750 guests last year. So we're now doing it every other year, and we'll be doing it again the last week of April and the first week of May next year in 2025.
And where will it be, out of curiosity?
We've been lucky. So far, it's been hosted at Charles Krug Winery. It has a beautiful carriage house space in St. Helena in the Napa Valley. I think probably for the next one, we'll go kind of beyond Napa, hopefully. But again, next year it'll be here in the Napa Valley.
Fantastic. I think this is something that, space allowing, we should be getting the word out there and getting people to come and get involved and, hear the call to action. I think that's the first thing that we have to do. They don't know they need to take action until we fill them in about that. So I hope.
And I just want to stress too, it's relevant to anyone in the wine industry. It's funny how many times I've had people ask, "Oh, is this just for Napa?" I struggle to think like what we could be talking about that would be just for Napa, but it's absolutely relevant to anyone in the wine industry. So we've been seeing more and more people from broader California, even international, coming. So I just want to stress this is something meant to be for anyone interested in leadership in the wine industry.
Well, I'm going to put all the links in the show notes so that people can get in touch with you, get in touch with Rise, and get more international people out there to hear about all the things that you've got going, because they're important. So I will make sure that's out there. And anybody who's listening, how can they get in touch with you, Anna, if they want to go to Rise?
Just go to napagreen.org, and our emails are all easy. It's our first name at napagreen.org. So Anna at napagreen.org. It's easy to track me down. And then we have risegreen.org is the event space, but you can find all of that on napagreen.org.
Fantastic. Thank you. So before I let you go, I know that, as I said earlier this year, Imbibe named you to their list of people who will shape the way we drink. So that's, no pressure there.
No pressure.
In light of low alcohol, no alcohol, pet nat, re-fermentati, all sorts of things, no pressure at all. So what new projects have you got coming up? I know you're working on a book about regenerative wine, so I want to hear about that. What would you like to really achieve in the next 5 years? Because you are on fire at the moment, and this is, well, hopefully not technically, but in terms of what you're doing for the industry, this is so important and it's so time sensitive. So talk about the book, and then tell me what you've got on the back burner for the next couple of years.
Or the front burner. Yeah, we have a lot going on. Before I dive into the book, I'll say some big things afoot, which is we are working on going beyond Napa. There has been a recognition that we really are setting this very high, very rigorous bar. Some people love that, some people don't. But there have been increasing requests for us to help people kind of beyond just our Napa County borders. And also, again, those really unique kind of consulting services that we do that no one else provides. So we are working on some regional expansion. So more to come on that. But we're also in conversations. There are some areas considering just licensing our standards, and we would serve as kind of consultants to help adapt them to other regions and get programs established in other regions. So, don't know for sure if that'll go further, but I think if we're talking about 5 years, I do see that. I really see an expansion in our touch points and our impact. And of course, that'll come with, we'll always have our Napa roots, but that will come with a broader identity. So there's going to be a lot more to come on that front, and a lot of work to do on that front. But it's really exciting. And then, yeah, I'm very excited about this book, although we were just talking before this about just how much work a book is. But I was actually at the International Masters of Wine Symposium last year, and there was a panel with Mimi Castile and Jamie Good and some others talking about regenerative viticulture. Obviously, this conversation is really kind of blowing up in our industry around regenerative. Again, it faces some of the challenges of sustainability. Kind of what exactly does it mean? There isn't one definition. Are people starting to use this term without kind of a whole systems approach? And so as I was hearing these leaders talk about this last year, I thought, we really, through the Rise Symposium, actually, we formed close relationships with a number of the world's absolute leaders in regenerative agriculture, including Mimi Castile and Kelly Mulville at Piscinus Ranch and Jason Haas at Tables Creek. And so I just started thinking we really need to bring a whole kind of set of global voices together to talk about what this means and what does it really look like from a whole systems integrated approach. And so I got this sort of inspiration to try to bring 12 global leaders together to each write a chapter, and also critically not just have it be about kind of the technical, the tools, really about telling a story. Because that's what brings us all in. That's what kind of tugs at the heartstrings, is telling a true story of the journey and what worked and what didn't. And so I reached out to all the people I already mentioned and more. And so we now have 11 authors, each writing a chapter, and it is totally international. So that includes Michele Manelli at Salcedo, right in your backyard. That includes Noelia Orts in Chile at Emiliana, and Johan Reinecke in South Africa, and Dudley Brown and Arena Santiago Brown in Australia. So we're really trying to bring a kind of full global perspective to how are we approaching regenerative viticulture. It's exciting, and it's also corralling 12 different voices, and I'm writing the introduction. But we're well on our way, and I think it's a pretty exciting project, and hopefully that book will be available in the not too distant future.
Well, let's define, from your perspective, regenerative wine for people who are listening. I work with Old Vines Conference. Old Vines is another term that we're working on defining. Yeah. So regenerative winemaking, definition from Anna.
Well, thankfully I was at an event last week where I was asked this question, so I've had a little practice. I mean, at its core, regenerative is about the soil. It's about cultivating soil that is as alive and healthy as possible. And so it's about farming for soil as opposed for, in our case, farming for the fruit. As you farm for the soil, you have a healthier plant, you have a better crop, and you have a whole system, because it's about this biodiversity and this health, both below ground and above ground, a system that's better able to moderate itself, that requires less human intervention to moderate itself, and can better weather extremes like the heat spikes that we're having, going from drought to incredible, what's called atmospheric rivers now, of insane rainstorms. Here we've had over 115 degrees. I can't immediately translate that to Celsius.
Yeah, it's about 44. Yeah.
Incredibly high temperatures. So it's about kind of that, building that happy microbial community, that diversity in cover crops, that diversity in plants, that diversity in animals, that just healthy system that's retaining water, storing water, delivering water, that is able to really be more resilient to the changes we're having, and really create as healthy and as place representative of a crop as possible. That would be my not so quick definition.
No, I think that's a brilliant definition. And I love the wines from Salcedo. I'm so happy you've got Michele writing a chapter for you. It's a wonderful winery with a beautiful ethos and a beautiful location that they have carefully built with this concept of being regenerative in mind. So I know you'll get a great chapter from him for sure. But
yes, and I want to visit. It's a good excuse to try to visit all of these beautiful
places.
Absolutely.
You'll need photos. You have to go take them.
Right? I mean, I'm going to have to do it.
Anna, I cannot thank you enough for coming on today. This is such an interesting conversation for me. I sort of like sustainability. When people hear the words DEI, they think about people of color and LGBTQ community and things like this. But for me, DEI has really morphed into a concept where diversity in our perspective within our wine industry is just as important as our own personal backstory. So I love hearing your perspective. Napa Green is doing so many great things. I know that, regional expansion will come. I hope it becomes global expansion soon, because we need you. But thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's really great to connect with you. I appreciate it as well.
Thank you for listening, and remember to tune in next Wednesday when I'll be chatting with another fascinating guest. Italian Wine Podcast is among the leading wine podcasts in the world and the only one with a daily show. Tune in every day and discover all our different shows. You can find us at ItalianWinePodcast.com, SoundCloud, Spotify, Himalaya, or wherever you get your pods.